Duke Vieto stood atop the defensive wall, watching the horizon. The dust rising in the distance told the story clearly. The Imperial Army was pulling back, column by column, in disciplined formation. Under normal circumstances, watching your enemy retreat should feel like relief. But Duke Vieto wasn't relieved. He was troubled, because a general doesn't abandon a winning position without a reason. The Imperial forces had held the momentum throughout this engagement. There was no logical explanation for them to simply stop, turn around, and walk away, which meant the reason existed somewhere else, somewhere outside the battlefield entirely. And that unknown variable was far more dangerous than anything happening in front of him. He called for Sanchez immediately. His orders were direct: contact their informants in the capital and find out what happened. Something had changed, and they needed to understand it before they could act on it. The informants arrived and delivered their report. When they spoke, the room went still. The cause of the Imperial retreat was Roman Dmitry. He had entered the capital of Valhalla alone, not as part of a coordinated strike, not backed by an army. Just Roman Dmitry, moving through the capital on his own terms, turning it into a one-sided slaughter. He had put a blade directly at the Empire's throat from the inside, and the chaos that followed was enough to force Count Gomez, who had been coordinating the frontline forces, to issue an emergency recall. The entire Imperial Army pulled back because one man made it necessary. Sanchez immediately lit up. For him, this was the moment they had been waiting for. Roman had finally acted, and the result was exactly what the rebels needed. He turned to Duke Vieto, clearly expecting to share in the celebration. But Duke Vieto wasn't celebrating, he was thinking. After a long silence, he offered a single observation that cut straight through the excitement in the room. Roman didn't come to help the rebels. He went after the Emperor. The capital wasn't a rescue operation. It wasn't a coordinated move in support of their cause. Roman had executed his own objective on his own timeline, and the rebels simply benefited from the fallout. Sanchez pushed back. Even if Roman acted independently, the results still worked in their favor. Abandoning their relationship with him entirely didn't make sense. That was the moment something shifted in Duke Vieto. He began to laugh, not out of relief, not out of surprise, but out of genuine, almost reluctant admiration. The more he turned it over in his mind, the more clearly he could see it. Roman hadn't just abandoned the rebels. He had used the timing of that abandonment as a weapon. He had identified the exact moment the rebel forces would be at their lowest, stretched thin, pressured from all sides, struggling to hold, and at that precise moment, instead of reinforcing them, he turned and struck at the heart of the Empire itself. By walking away from the rebels, he cornered the entire Imperial family in a single move. The boldness of it, the patience of it, the precision of it. Duke Vieto explained it plainly to Sanchez. This wasn't recklessness, it was a calculation. Roman had seen the board clearly, waited for the right moment, and made a move that no one else would have dared to make. For a brief moment, Duke Vieto saw the shadow of someone he used to know, his old master, in the way Roman had approached this decision. There was no time to dwell on it. The current situation was an opportunity that wouldn't stay open long, and Duke Vieto immediately issued the order. Summon all the rebel leaders. Whatever comes next, it starts now. The Valhalla Empire wasn't only dealing with what Roman had done inside its capital. Far to the west, 3 kingdoms, Redford, Umberto and Frank, had quietly assembled a massive military presence along Valhalla's western border. The sheer scale of the build-up made it impossible to ignore. Valhalla sent a messenger with all the authority the Empire could project. The message was blunt: explain the military concentration. If the Alliance had hostile intentions toward Valhalla, the Emperor would not let it stand. Standing across from that messenger was Drake, the Alliance representative. He listened without any visible concern, and when the silence stretched, he responded with complete composure. The kingdoms had gathered for training. It was a routine exercise. Nothing about it was unusual or worth worrying over. The messenger was furious. Even a short time ago, dismissing Valhalla like this would have been unthinkable. The Empire's name alone carried weight that commanders throughout the continent respected. But Drake continued in the same unhurried tone, adding that the Alliance had no interest in crossing into Valhalla's territory and sincerely hoped everything could be resolved peacefully. His expression as he said it was almost pleasant. No one believed a word of it. Valhalla certainly didn't. And that was the entire point. It didn't matter whether the Alliance ever actually invaded. What mattered was that Valhalla now had to treat invasion as a constant, credible threat. Their military attention was fractured. Their resources were being pulled in multiple directions at once. The psychological toll of being surrounded, of waiting for a strike that might come at any moment, was doing its own damage, quietly and continuously. Valhalla had slipped perfectly into the shape Roman had designed for it without ever realizing the trap had been set. Inside the palace, in his private office, Marquis Belfir was not at peace. He had been pacing for some time. The memory of the day Roman invaded the palace kept returning to him, and at the centre of that memory was the moment the Emperor ran, not fought, not commanded the defence, simply ran, abandoning everyone around him to whatever came next. All of Marquis Belfir's years of service, all of his loyalty, all the sacrifices he had made in the name of the Empire, in the name of his duty to the throne. In that one moment, the Emperor had made it clear how much those things were worth to him. Nothing. They were useful while they were useful, and disposable the moment they weren't. The bitterness of that realization had settled into something colder and heavier as the days passed. Belfir's gaze drifted toward the communication device across the room. The imperial family's power wasn't absolute anymore. That was no longer a theory. It had been demonstrated loudly in front of everyone. And if Roman Dmitry couldn't be stopped, then there was really only one rational response left. He reached out and activated the device. He called Roman. Roman answered. He asked without preamble why Belfir was reaching out. Belfir skipped any pretense. He acknowledged plainly that Roman had not spared him out of mercy. There was a reason he was still alive, and he wanted to understand what that reason was. He asked directly what Roman wanted from him. Roman's response gave him almost nothing to work with. Prove your worth. You have 10 minutes. The pressure was immediate and total. Belfir reached for the most valuable information he had. He revealed that the rumours circulating about the Emperor aligning with the Kronos Empire were false. The reality traced back further to the former Emperor, who had specifically arranged for his 14th son to ascend the throne. The reasoning behind that decision remained a mystery even to Belfir, but he was certain the information itself was accurate. Roman was unmoved. He simply asked whether that was everything. Belfir realized quickly that it wasn't enough. He changed tactics. He argued his deeper value. His influence within Valhalla's political structure ran wide and deep. He could actively support the rebellion from the inside. In exchange, he wanted a place in whatever order followed the Empire's fall. He forced confidence into his voice as he made the offer. It wasn't a bad deal. For a moment, it seemed like Roman might engage with it. He acknowledged that Belfir's value was understood. Then he explained that he had never intended to accept it. Belfir was stunned. He pushed harder, listing his connections, his access, his position at the centre of Valhalla's power. Surely that counted for something. Roman dismissed it without hesitation. Belfir was overestimating himself. Then, in steady and measured terms, Roman laid out the truth. There is a clear line, he explained, between people who can still be negotiated with and those who have already gone too far past the point of no return. He asked Belfir which side of that line he stood on. Belfir had no answer. The silence said everything. Roman didn't wait for one. He explained exactly why he had kept Belfir alive, not for his political value, and not out of any potential usefulness going forward. The reason was simpler and more ruthless than that. Belfir's continued existence was enough on its own to plant deep distrust between him and the Emperor. The Emperor would wonder. He would suspect. Every day that Belfir remained alive and unaccounted for, that suspicion would grow. The path back to imperial grace wasn't narrowing. It had already closed entirely the moment Belfir picked up the communication device. And then came the final blow. In 15 days, Roman would send a complete recording of this conversation directly to the Valhalla Emperor. Belfir had no options left. His loyalty to the Empire was already destroyed in the Emperor's eyes. Any attempt to explain or walk back what he had said on that call would only confirm the suspicion. Roman laid it out with cold finality. If Belfir wanted to survive, he had one path forward: use every resource available to him to dismantle the Emperor from within. Otherwise, the recording arrives, and Belfir's fate is sealed regardless. The line went dead. For several long moments, Marquis Belfir stood completely still. Then the weight of it all broke loose at once: rage, despair, fear, the crushing helplessness of a man who has finally understood, too late, how thoroughly he was outmaneuvered. He hurled the communication device to the floor and destroyed it beneath his feet. Because now he understood what had been true from the very beginning, every step he took leading to that call, every word he chose during it, every calculation he made about leverage and survival. Roman had already accounted for all of it. The conversation wasn't a negotiation, it was a closing statement on a trap that had been set long before Belfir ever reached out. Chapter 203 ends with Roman having struck the Empire from multiple directions simultaneously. Military pressure on the western border, chaos inside the capital, and now a forced betrayal unfolding at the heart of Valhalla's own power structure. He didn't need to be in the room for any of it. The Empire is fracturing from within, and the pieces are all in motion. What happens when Belfir has no choice but to act? And how many other traps has Roman already set that no one has seen yet? Whatever comes next, one thing is becoming clear. By the time the people around Roman realize what his plan is, it's already finished.